Hi, I'm John Appleyard, Category Manager for Digital Cameras at Reevoo.com, and I thought it would be helpful to take some time, have a detailed look at exactly what happens when you take a photo using your digital camera. Having a better understanding of the way a camera works will ultimately help you to decide what camera you want to buy. So let's have a look at everything that's taken into account when you press down that shutter and take your first photo.
There are a select group of settings that are taken into account when you press the shutter button on your camera and take a photo. To get a better understanding of how a camera works, and therefore what you will need to suit your photography needs, let's run through the most important features and settings. The sensor. In all modern cameras, a lens focuses light through an aperture and shutter onto a focal plane. In an old-fashioned camera, the focal plane was the film. In a digital camera, the focal plane is called the sensor. The sensor receives the light that hits it, and then the light is taken through an amplification process and converted into ones and zeros for digital storage. ISO is a standard for recording your camera sensor's sensitivity to light. A higher number ISO means you can take a photograph at a higher shutter speed than if you're shooting at a low ISO, because less light is needed to achieve the same exposure. However, due to the amplification process of the sensor, image quality will diminish. This is because the sensor has to work harder at interpreting the low light. In digital cameras, the ISO setting can be changed. Different cameras have different ISO ranges and different levels of manual control. Megapixels. Megapixels are a common focus point for people when buying a camera. The amount of megapixels a camera has dictates the size of the photograph, and through that, the quality of the image. However, I'll explain later how megapixels are not the be-all and end-all of photography, especially when it comes to low-light situations. Aperture. When your camera takes a photo, the lens opens a circular series of petals that together form the aperture. The further they open, the more light they let in. Aperture also has an effect on depth of field. This can be used well for artistic effect or out of necessity, as we'll see later, when having to work in low light situations. Aperture is measured in f-stops and will commonly be recorded in a range. For example, the maximum aperture of my Nikon 1870 lens is f3.5 at 18mm, but f4.5 at 70mm. Shutter speed. This is your bread and butter setting. A camera has a shutter that opens and closes when you take a photo. As it opens, it allows light to fall onto the camera's sensor. The faster the shutter speed, the quicker it opens and closes. As a result, this affects how long the light hits the sensor for. The longer the light hits the sensor, the brighter the image will be, and the more likely you are to get motion blur from a moving subject or from the movement of your own hands as you hold the camera. Exposure. This is not a setting, it's a goal. The aim when taking a photo is to achieve the correct exposure. The correct exposure means that your image is not too bright and it's not too dark. Through a combination of the previously discussed settings, the correct exposure can be achieved. If too much light hits the sensor at too high sensitivity, then the image will overexpose. If not enough light hits the sensor and you're working at a low ISO, your image will underexpose and be too dark.
What you'll realise is that in a lot of everyday situations, most of these features that we've ran through are not too important. Any camera is very good at handling a scene when there's a lot of light available and it's not having to sacrifice one element for another. But if you're, for example, taking a photo of your favourite band, and you've got a low light situation, you've got fast moving subjects, you soon realise that the right balance being struck between these features is going to be very important for you to get the photo that you want. So having control over those features is going to be something you're going to want to consider.